All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. A lot of things going on with the Cowboys. Of course, the Micah Parsons drama continues to roll on, but there's a lot of positive stuff as well. A lot of actual things happening on the practice field that I think is really important, and we'll cover all of that, of course. If you have any comments or questions, as always, put them in the comment section below. We'll address them next video, and at the end of today's video, I'll address yesterday's comments and questions. But to get things going, a little palate cleanser, as I like to say, let's start with a couple stats of the day. Because with everything going on with Parsons and the Cowboys and across the National Football League, everyone has kind of lost the plot a little bit in terms of what really matters when it comes to wins. So I want to show up a little graphic here to kind of highlight what I'm talking about. So this is over the past 3 seasons, and this is a correlation of the defensive sacks you get, how many times you sack the opposing quarterback, which obviously Parsons is very good at, in relationship to wins, right? And you can see there's obviously a correlation there. You can see the teams that get the fewest sacks, the Bears and the Panthers, fewest wins, and a lot of teams that get the most sacks, the Ravens, Eagles, Chiefs, and even Dallas, get some of the most wins. But you'll notice that's a little scattered all over the place. You can see all the different logos of all the different teams. You can see the trend line in the middle there is sort of almost a perfect relationship, but the actual points of all the different teams are all over the map. And if you see on the bottom right there, you can see that RSQ number, that's R squared. That's a correlation coefficient for anyone who's not familiar with province stats. You don't have to worry too much about that. It means just that the closer that number is to 1, it's on, that number is on a scale of 0 to 1. The closer number is to 1, the closer that correlation is causation, right? The closer that the data points are to the trend line. So right there, we've got an R squared of about 0.4, right? So again, not a lot of correlation there, right? The trend line seems to indicate that more sacks lead to more wins, and generally that seems to be the case, but there's a lot of anomalies. There's a lot of things outside the box, like the Lions, like the Bills, or teams like, let's say, the New York Jets that get an above average amount of sacks but don't do much winning at all. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is sort of my larger point. So this is adjusted yards per attempt, the same metric comparing, or same kind of chart, comparing adjusted yards per passing attempt against wins, right? And adjusted yards per attempt, for anyone who isn't familiar, it's yards per attempt, but it's weighting in touchdowns and interceptions. So this is just sort of on a per attempt basis, evaluating quarterback play more than anything else. And you can see, again, very similar relationship. There seems to be some correlation between the adjusted yards per attempt. The higher it goes, the more winning you do. But what's interesting here is that the correlation between the actual scatter points and that trend line in the middle there is significantly better. If you go look at the bottom right again at that R squared number, you can see I mentioned before, the closer to 1, the better the correlation. It's 0.7, right? 0.706. So go back into the first one, so you can see on the bottom right there, it's 0.4. Was it 0.42, 0.43, right? So over here we got 0.7, and we're talking on a scale of 0 to 1, so that's a pretty big leap. What am I saying here? I'm saying that as much as sacks matter and rushing the passer matters, and Micah Parsons certainly does matter, and TJ Watt matters, and Max Crosby matters for those teams, and so on and so forth, the reality is quarterback play is so far heavily weighted more than anything else. You've got to get quarterback play executing at a high level. That is the most important thing. And that kind of leads us into the camp news from yesterday. So I'm going to go through what Tommy Yarish did posted first. It's a good follow on X if you're looking for camp news. A lot of stuff here. Just kind of rolling through this really quick. CeeDee Lamb's acrobatic catch was the play of the day, but he and Dak Prescott connected on another deep ball later in practice that Prescott dropped right in the bucket. You know, one of the under the radar things right now is how well Lamb is playing, how well Pickens is playing, how well Prescott is playing in camp. Now we'll have to see that translate, of course, on Sundays. But like I showed in the graph a few seconds ago, passing game, adjusted yards per attempt, significantly better indication of wins than sacks. Sacks is a good one. Passing a game, passing efficiency is a much, much better one. So as much as it's disappointing to see the Parsons saga continue to run on, let's not lose our eye on the prize here, and that really the priority of this team and every team should be getting the quarterback position and the passing attack better, and based on reporting, they are doing a good job there. All right, next report here. Continually noticed Samar James and Phil Moffitt today. James continuing to get a lot of snaps with the first team defense and fit the run well. Moffitt had his best day of camp, in my honest opinion. All right, that's good news there, but let's put that away for a side. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Solomon Thomas had a pair of would-be sacks and was pretty fired up after the second one. Much better day overall for the defensive line today. He seems to be going into a good veteran depth piece like a lot of people hoped he would. There were some question marks. You know, he's not an elite player. He's not a superstar by any means, but just a quality guy up front as a part of the front four. Good depth guy, good veteran, seems to be becoming that kind of player. Did not see Tyler Smith at practice. Brock Hoffman took a majority of the first team reps at left guard in his absence. Yeah, they're being precautionary, it seems, with Tyler Smith, which you should at this point. Get some of these younger guys like Hoffman, more reps in this new offensive scheme. I like Hoffman. I've been very high on him as a backup, as a guy to step in when injuries happen. So having him go through like simulating an in-season process where he has to fill in for someone that gets hurt when there's some injuries, not actually a bad thing here to happen during camp. You want to kind of use training camp to simulate as many real in-season experiences as possible. Starter goes down, a backup has to now run with the ones, run with the first string. That's what we're seeing here. And again, Smith's injury just seems to be a little tendonitis, some soreness, nothing big there, just very precautionary, not wanting to risk more serious injury. Undrafted free agent safety Elijah Clark had a pick off at Joe Milton today. Milton underthrew it in double coverage, and Clark was able to get it pretty easily. I mean, that's obviously a good sign he made the play. And then the bottom point there is about the Micah Parsons stuff, which we'll get to in just a second. Let's circle back to this second bullet here. Continually notice Shamar James and Phil Moffitt today, right? Talking about James continuing to get a lost snap at the first string. So this is one guy's report. This is Tommy Yerish's report. I always look for what I call corroborating evidence. Can we get multiple reports? Can we get multiple indications that, different people, different vantage points see the same thing? So when I go to my next slide of news here, this is from Kyle Yamans, who also was reporting on Cowboys practice. You'll notice that third point down here, and this is his opinion, right? Shamar James running with the ones looking the part. So we're now seeing a bunch of reports that Shamar James, this young linebacker, getting some first string reps. Now, this happens all the time during training camp. Don't make it out like, oh, James is a new starter, all this. But it is a positive indicator that this rookie is coming along. There were flashes early in camp, and now he's stepping up his game. A lot of opportunities. He was an under-the-radar draft selection. A lot of the Cowboys picks got a lot of praise. I really like Shamar James, especially at the position of need. There are reports that Maris Leofau is doing a phenomenal job. He's, had a great punch out yesterday. He's a really smart guy, potentially emerging as a starter for this Cowboys linebacking core. Sam Bourne kind of solid and steady. Murray back into the fold after dealing with, I think, the birth of one of his children. So congratulations to him. Good to see him back. Obviously, Overshone's injured. So there's a lot of questions at linebacker right now. But if you have a guy here in Shamar James, young guy stepping up, Leofau stepping up as another young guy, this is a young defense. People look at the Cowboys and they get this sort of misconception that this is like a old veteran team, and it's because I think people have seen Dak Prescott play since his rookie year, and we're going on almost 10 years now, and because it's the Cowboys and get so much media attention, one Cowboy gets 100 references in a year as opposed to a guy on another team making 100 references in 10 years. So you think of these Cowboys are like, oh, he's been around forever. It's funny. I was actually talking to my wife about Micah Parsons, and she's like, isn't Parsons old though? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like 26. It's like, oh, I just hear about him all the time, right? And that's just what happens with the Cowboys, right? So people have this conception like Dallas is a veteran team. They're not. They're extremely young. And that's why I think that a lot of people, look at what 2025 is going to be for Dallas. I don't think anyone thinks of them, to be honest, to be objective. I'm hoping they do, but no one thinks of them as a serious, deep playoff team. No one thinks of them as a championship team. I don't. But 2026 and, that kind of youth movement taking hold, some of these young guys, Ezraku, Booker, BB, Guyton, those Shamar James in the mix, Leofau, Overshone, right? You keep going down the list here. Some of these young guys becoming deeper. Revel as a corner. Jadon Blue, Phil Moffitt, right? You keep going down the list here. Guys like Brevin Spanford, who is still battling back from injury. Want to see him come back. Really high on him. We're seeing this Cowboys sort of youth movement under Schottenheimer slowly take hold. The question is going to be, is it going to be enough? Are they going to have to make any other additional big-time trades like they did this offseason with Pickens? But overall, a lot of young guys doing some good things, which is what you want to see. Another thing to highlight there, Ezzy and Toya continuing the great rookie camp. Ezraku and Toya there, the interior defensive lineman. Yeah, Toya is such an interesting guy to me because it's such a position of need. Definitely a guy to keep an eye on there. All right, let's get into the Parsons thing. So there was a report out yesterday from Jane Slater, who's a good reporter. Highly recommend you follow her on X. And she's done some good reporting and commentary on the Parsons drama. So let's get into what she said. Let's talk about it a little bit. I'm told the offer would have made him the highest paid defensive player at the time, but nothing was ever written down. No offer sheet, etc. Of course, he got his agent involved. Anyone would. I'm told Micah was not under the impression the terms were ironed out. It was discussed, agreed upon, and that should be the end right there. But I'll circle back to that. But then he wanted to loop agent in. The agent likely said, let's be smart. There are other guys doing deals, and anything Jerry thought he won, the discussion is now up for negotiation. During the intense negotiations with D-Law, DeMarcus Lawrence, Tank Lawrence, they hopped on a call and they ironed things out. But the whole thing, and now the stare down of sorts, is wild to me. it shouldn't be wild to you, Gene Slater, if you've actually worked in the real world, right? And this is what happens for people that you live in a certain job, whether it's sports media, and anyone who's worked corporate, real world kind of stuff. If you have a sit down with your boss or your boss's boss and you agree to something, or if you're on a sales call and you agree, you have a handshake deal, like she reported that what the terms were ironed out, or the terms were discussed and agreed upon. If you were on a sales meeting with somebody and you're trying to do business with somebody and you agreed, and I've been in this situation, most people have in different levels, but you agreed on terms, all right, and then you left. And then that one of the parties came back later and said, hey, I want to change the terms. Your first thought is, I don't want to do business with you anymore. You're done, right? I'm not talking to you anymore. You're done. And that's what 99% of the time what happens, right? Now, Jerry Jones and the Cowboys obviously want to keep doing business with Parsons. They want to keep him on the team. So they dug into it. And you read the report, it was all from the agent's perspective. Parsons, was going to be the highest paid defensive player in football. He would make the money. The Cowboys under Jerry Jones, for all the criticisms levied against him, were, according to Jane Slater, who is not, a Jerry Jones acolyte. She's been very critical of the Cowboys and Jones, very pro Micah Parsons, as you can see by the commentary here, that they were going to make him the highest paid defensive player in the game. Okay, that's all I did was that make Micah the highest paid defensive player of the game. Give him the money he's worth. And what happened? Parsons turned it down. Parsons' agent turned it down. And I think that's one of the things to focus on. I said this yesterday. The real villain in this story, if there is one, is the Micah Parsons agent, David Mulligetta. Actually, it's funny. The Bengals wide receiver, T. Higgins, was going through a holdout similar situation. That deal wasn't getting done. He actually fired Mulligetta. Said, listen, this is getting ridiculous. This is the kind of guy who Mulligetta is, the agent for Parsons. He's got a lot of guys in the NFL, right? He's a guy that wants to be in total control. He feels he has to be doing everything when it comes to negotiations and things like that. He's a very, I don't know if this is true. I'm not trying to talk him personally, but he feels very insecure, right? He feels like he has to be the guy doing everything. And I think that has hurt Parsons here. That's hurt him. Because think about it from the Jerry Jones perspective and the Cowboys perspective. If you agreed to terms with somebody and you said, okay, yeah, we agree. Yeah, that's fine. We'll get the lawyers later. We'll draw out the paperwork later, but we all agree. Okay, great. And then time goes by and you get a call saying from a different representative of that person saying, yeah, everything you agreed upon, no more. It's not valid anymore. You would sit there and say, okay, I'm not talking to you. I was talking to this guy, not you. And that's exactly what the Cowboys have done. That's like logical common sense. You don't even have to be a billionaire businessman to understand that, right? And I think we all would be in that situation and follow the same thing that Jerry Jones did and the Cowboys did. Now, you can make an argument that the way they went about the meeting, and I made this point yesterday, wasn't exactly the best. But still, based on Slater's reporting here, and again, so throw that little grain of salt there because it is just her reporting, it turns out that the Cowboys and Parsons did agree, at least in principle, to make him the highest paid player in football in March. And then Parsons' agent came in and threw a big wrench in the whole plan. I wouldn't negotiate with the agent either. This is bad business from the agent. Not a huge fan of this. All right, next reporting when it comes to this kind of interesting here. This is from John Machota over The Athletic. He wrote, Cowboys owner Jerry Jones said it did not anger him to read Micah Parsons' message/trade request. He said, not a bit. I can't tell you how many hundreds of times I've heard that negotiation. When Jones had been asked about fans yelling for him to sign Parsons, he continues to point out how loud fans were last year when they wanted him to sign CeeDee Lamb. He said, it was just so much louder walking off the field last year with Lamb. I will say this, Jerry Jones is really good at this. He is really, really good at this, as much as it can be very frustrating as a Cowboys fan. Because it's in the media, right? You hear people on social media, oh, the Cowboys chanting, we want to pay Micah, very anti-Jerry Jones. He's like, last year was louder. He just keeps walking along. And it's going to just irk in the craw Mulligetta on the agent because he has no control. He has no leverage, right? The Cowboys, if they wanted to, could carry Micah Parsons' rights through 2027 using multiple franchise tags. And he would not be remotely close to the highest paid defensive player in football over the course of those 3 years. Now, he'd still get paid a lot of money, but still, it'd be at a discount. So Mulligetta understands that. Jerry Jones understands that. So he's trying to do like a media campaign to get people to turn on Jerry Jones. And Jones is like, this happens every year, which is one of the things that's part of Jerry Jones' strategy. That's what people don't understand. When you consistently have these kind of contract negotiations, and this is sort of the smart move of it, I don't like it because I think it hurts the Cowboys potentially winning chances, but from a negotiation perspective, it's pretty smart. When you have this kind of stature and stance all the time, the media hits, the frenzy, the publicity, it doesn't bother you. You're used to it. And that's why there's nothing that's going to change. And that's why Parsons and Mulligata have no leverage. And that's why the Cowboys they're going to end up winning this thing one way or the other. I honestly think. Now, I think Parsons is going to get paid a lot of money. He's going to be the highest paid defensive player in football. He's going to get that. But he's not going to get what he wants. And I think the agent for Micah Parsons knows this. Jerry Jones knows this. The Cowboys knows this. And look, this is one of those situations. He holds all the cards. The Cowboys hold all the cards. That's just the reality of the situation right now. All right, this is from Schottenheimer, from according to Patrick Walker at Voice of the Star. You should follow him, good reporter, DallasCowboys.com. I've talked to Micah, great conversations. I'm not going to share what we talked about. Went on to say that he won't keep speaking about the situation. I expect to see him out there today, and he has been since the start of camp, and Parsons was out there. Kind of a funny thing you see where it's like, there's something going on social media. Parsons at camp. He's at camp to avoid a $50,000 a day fine, and if he misses 5 or 6 in a row or something like that, he gets put on an NFI non-football related injury list, which affects him playing the season. So he's showing up just to avoid fines. The old Marshawn Lynch. I'm just here so I don't get fined. That's essentially what Parsons is doing. But there's been a lot of commentary on social media. It's like, oh wow, look at him showing up, walking past the Stephen Jones or Jerry Jones or whatever in camp. What guts Micah Parsons has. And like, this is again the disconnect from the real world, right? I mean, how many of us have been in the middle of, raise negotiations or promotion negotiations with our boss's boss. I mean, walk by him in the office, right? This is something that happens every day. Let's not act like Parsons is storming the beaches of Normandy here. So, but he is in camp, and there seems to be a lot of a good camaraderie, good work between him and the players, which you would expect. The players are always going to be about each other getting paid because look, they're not on the business side. They're in the player side, as they should be, right? They should be focused on each other and the team and camaraderie and trying to make sure everyone is happy as the players, just like the business people have to run the business stuff. So, everything seems to be relatively fine when it comes to the Cowboys. A lot of people freak out and overreact. I wouldn't. Jerry Jones himself said, don't lose any sleep over this. This happens every year. I trust him. He knows he has the cards. He knows he has the leverage. The Parsons people know he has the leverage. I think the thing that really annoys me, and I talked about it yesterday, and just the villain of this is so much the Cowboys agent, because the Cowboys could have literally signed and probably would have signed Micah Parsons to make him a deal, the most highest paid the defensive player in football back in March or April timeframe. Parsons could have superseded his agent, sent $1 million to get the best lawyer in Dallas to do the paperwork and look out for him, and then not had to pay his agent 10%, which is going to end up being tens of millions of dollars. So Parsons could have saved money. The agent could have stayed out of this. The Cowboys would have signed. Everyone would have been happy. Mulligata is the guy who's the real villain here. Not that Parsons is blameless, not that Jerry Jones is blameless, but it's clear who the real villain is. And it's not Parsons and it's not Jones. It's this middleman. All right, that's stories from yesterday. I think the Shamar James one is definitely one to keep an eye on, folks. A linebacker, young linebacker for Dallas. I'm really excited to see. Definitely going to start breaking them down into some film reviews, which we're going to start having coming pretty soon once we get into the actual preseason game. So that's all exciting stuff. Let's get to some comments from yesterday, because obviously talking the Parsons situation, got a lot of commentary about this. So this first one is from Javon Jones 95. Dallas will pay Mike exactly what he wants. We've seen this play out in the same fashion time and time again. 100% agree. I mean, it may not be exactly what Parsons wants, but he's going to get paid a lot of money, and he's going to, get a highest amount of guaranteed at highest paid defensive player in football. He's going to get paid. He's going to be a Cowboy. That's the 99.9% probability here. So got a lot of commentary on my take of Romo and Prescott. I said, I was critical of Romo, saying, listen, this is a guy who wasn't clutch, I think was the words I used. And I guess to be fair, at the end of his career, he certainly was spectacularly clutch, especially the 2014 season, right? And he had his moments along the way. I think for me, the biggest, or really, if you want to be honest, the first game in 2015, before he got hurt, that comeback against the Giants was a great game too. I just think there was a lot of moments, certainly in the early and middle part of Romo's career, those big games. When I say clutch, I'm thinking big games, right? Not fourth quarter comebacks. He obviously had a bunch of those. Bills in 2007, Lions in 2007, I think. I mean, he had a lot of great comebacks over the course of his career. But I just look at big games and big moments, and there was a lot more major disappointments than there was success. So, for example, Dan DeTola wrote, "You're wrong on Romo. Dude was clutch. I always thought we were in any close game with him at the helm. Prescott, not so much." Yeah, I think Romo was good in the regular moment. Week 9, Romo was fantastic. Week 1, Week 14. But Week 16, Week 17, playoffs, there was just a weird thing where it just fell apart, right? And not that he always seemed to be a turnover machine at times. He had the ability. Go back to that Bills game, I think he had 4 or 5 turnovers, but he pulled it out in the end. I think the problem was he didn't, for whatever reason, he just couldn't pull it out in the biggest moments. And I think that was, really the biggest criticism of Romo, right? We know in 2006 the drop snap in the wild card game. We know in 2007 scoring 17 points at home after going 13-3 with a high-powered offense, interception in the end zone in the final seconds, right? We know in 2008, going into a game at Philadelphia, you win the NFC East. Bunch of turnovers, only score 6 points, no touchdowns, get absolutely obliterated. We know 2009, great finish to the season, great wild card victory over Philly, phenomenal. And then he goes into Minnesota, 3 total points, no touchdowns, bunch of turnovers, right? 2010, he gets hurt. I'm not blaming him for that, of course. But then you go 2011 and 2012, I believe it was those 2 years, he had back-to-back chances to win the NFC East in the final week of the regular season, right? 2013, same thing happened, but he was hurt. I'm not obviously going to blame him for that. But in 2011 and 2012, he throws 3 picks, only 18 points against Washington. They lose. And in 2012, that was. In 2011, New York Giants only scores 14 points. They fall behind late. He makes it a game, but they kind of fell behind too much at New York, weren't able to pull it out. And again, it's not like Romo was awful and catastrophically bad in those instances. It just, well, I'll say this: 3 picks against Washington was pretty bad. It's just that he wasn't good enough, right? He didn't have that moment. He didn't have the Rodgers run where Rodgers would go on just a 8-game run where he was unstoppable. Even Flacco had a run. Brady had a bunch of these. Breeze had a bunch of these. Eli Manning had 2 of them, right? Romo never had that run that he could overcome it. He got close, and I think he got screwed in 2014. I think that was his run. But he had so many chances where it didn't have to go perfect. It didn't have to go to the official screwing up that Des Bryant catch where he could have gone on a run and been magical, and he just went the opposite way. And that's what I mean when I say he's not clutch. He's a stupendous player. I was a huge fan of Romo. Loved Romo. My dad and a lot of people hated Romo. I loved Romo. But the reality was, in those big games, we can be honest about it, he didn't step up to the plate. At David Lawrence 8051 posted, these agents are toxic. Look at Scott Boras in baseball. You can't let an agent run your locker room. Exactly, right? Now, to kind of, highlight a little bit about myself here, I've read a lot just for whatever reason interesting and for things just because of historical things. It's like financial markets and business and things like that. One of the things I found in 2 good books I recommend if you're into this kind of stuff, both by Michael Lewis, Liar's Poker and The Big Short. The Big Short, of course, they made the movie about a few years ago. And what you learn when you read those books and get into the situation is that the worst people in finance are those brokers, the intermediaries, right? There's the people that are buying and selling assets and securities, but the worst are the brokers because they get just a little piece of the pie each transaction. So they're just incentivized to make transactions, right? And those are the people that don't care who wins or loses, makes money, loses money. If the economy tanks, if the economy does great, if people do great, if people do poorly, it's all about getting more transactions. Those middlemen, those brokers in that case, are the problem, just like the agent is here. These middlemen can certainly be a problem. And that's exactly, by the way, what at SWright4220, the middleman is always the villain. I agree 100%. All right. Wright also said, this is a good point, these millionaire and billionaires always do business in informal places like the golf course, a business party, whatever. The best time to do business is right now. Micah should fire his agent, take the deal, and keep 100%. Exactly right. Could not agree more. 100%. I would say you probably should hire a lawyer just to iron out the contract details, but again, you can get the best lawyer in Dallas for $1 million, and he would save tens of millions of dollars. All right, this is sort of a couple comments that we've seen similar to this vein. At TR6888, JJ became a billionaire by crushing people, parentheses workers, and stepping over the bodies. And 80-year-old billionaires have a life of entitlement. Doesn't mean he's a good manager because he is not. Screw the Jones family like they screwed the Landry family. Yeah, I mean, this is just such a misguided indication of history. It's just false. Jerry Jones became a billionaire because he made a lot of good investment decisions and allocated capitals and highly risky ones in the oil business, and then leveraged that even further, of course, when he bought the Cowboys in the late 1980s. Now, you cannot like Jerry Jones as a manager, but the reality is people generally become billionaires by being very, very good at what they do. It's, in fact, I can't think of a single example outside of inheriting billions of dollars where someone doesn't become a billionaire by being extremely, extremely good at what they do. You may not like Jerry Jones personally. You may think he's bad for the Cowboys, and that's very, very fair. But to say he's not a good manager or not very successful or not very smart, that's just wrong, right? And I think that's an important point to make. You can disagree with Jones. You can think he's bad for Dallas. You can think he's a bad person, and that's your opinion. You can certainly have it, and there may be even some good evidence to support those things. But to say he's not successful and not smart, that's just not factual, and it doesn't support your argument, doesn't support your stance at all. All right, this is from Richard Rushing, 8524. This crap with Parsons is BS. Parsons is his own company. Every player owns their own company. They are the boss of their own franchise, whom has the final say in their contract with their NFL team. They have to live by the word when agreeing to the framework to a contract. Yeah, I know you don't mean literally your own company, although I know that Caleb Williams actually tried to structure himself as an LLC, which is really smart, by the way, when he was drafted by the Bears for tax purposes. It's some other accounting things, but I do agree that you have to understand as a player, you are your brand, you are your business. And if you become a guy where your word isn't your bond, people aren't going to want to do business with you. And as good as you are, Parsons, at 26, it's sort of like, it's like the pretty girl analogy. Like, you're going to have a lot of people going after you if you're a pretty girl in your early 20s, right? We all understand that. But the reality is, if you hit your 40s or 50s and looks fade as it does for all of us, suddenly you're not going to be as valuable anymore. Suddenly it's going to be more about the relationships you made, right? And if you're kind of a really tough person to deal with, and you think you can get away with it forever just because you're young and pretty, or young and hyper talented, ain't always going to work out for you. Roger Staubach proved that perfectly. Always focused on business relationships and personal relationships. Built a massive empire while he was playing. After he was playing, Parsons should really focus on that as well if he wants to do more than just be a great NFL player. But if he just wants to be a great NFL player, that of course is fine too. 100% his choice. This is the last comment. This is a really good one. This is from Matt Stephen Vanover. If I may, I am confused. You start by pointing out that your earlier takes should not count because you did not have specific information. This is all about Parsons, so bear with me. Which you now have. Okay. You point out that Jerry Jones is almost certainly an incredible business person. Double okay. You also point out that Micah was only 26 years old when he had his conversations with him, and how that is very young. Solid point. What I don't get is how the setup allows someone to judge Micah for getting outmaneuvered by Jerry Jones. That is Jerry's playground. He used less than honorable business tactics. I agree. To try and strong arm a young superstar into a team-friendly deal. Now, if Jerry had sacked Micah, it would be news. Jerry doing what Jerry does is not something that should be defended. I'm not saying, so I apologize for this, the point I was making. I'm not trying to be critical of Micah Parsons. I was just trying to state a fact, right? And look, I've made bad, I think we all have, right? When we're young, we made bad decisions. In general, when we were young, we didn't know better, right? Business decisions, career decisions, personal decisions. The reason I threw all that information about Parsons is, before I said he got played by Jerry Jones here a little bit, was I was trying to explain that it's not really necessarily, I mean, it is his fault because he made it, but there's good extenuating circumstances. He's young, right? This is his first major contract negotiation, right? He's not a guy who lives in the business world, right? He's a football player. So when he got played by Jerry Jones, it was sort of an unfair advantage. It's like Parsons going one-on-one against a third-string tackle in pass rush. You don't blame the third-string tackle, the undrafted third-string tackle one-on-one on Parsons. You say, hey, man, you got beat. You got Micah Parsons beat you, and he beat you good. But you're also like, I can see why. That's fair that you got beat. I'm not going to crush you because you got beat. Similar situation here with Parsons in this negotiation. I'm not trying to be critical of Parsons and saying, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that he went into this negotiation and made a mistake. He was in the wrong. He screwed up. Now, we all have. I've made about 5,000 business, career, financial mistakes in my early to mid-20s. I think most of us probably have. But we also have to understand that it was a mistake. It was a bad move, and that's what opened the door to all these things. If he had taken a different approach, if he had walked away from the meeting and said, Jerry Jones, hey, man, thanks for talking contract. Send my agent an offer sheet before we negotiate any further. If he had said that at the very beginning, none of this would have happened. We can all agree, right? None of this would have happened. But he didn't. He made that mistake. Not necessarily his fault. Young, not a business person, right? So that's all very fair, and we all need to take that with a grain of salt. He's not a business guy. And Jerry Jones, like I said yesterday, did use, I will say, not the little shady tactic, to put it very mildly, in terms of what he was doing with Parsons. But I do think we have to, all that aside, we have to recognize that Parsons made a business mistake here. Because once you have that framing of it, then you can sit there and say, okay, even though it's not necessarily his fault, we can say, okay, he made a mistake, and that's why the Cowboys feel this way. Now, was he strong-armed into that mistake? Was there, is it 100%, he's not a business guy, young guy, you can understand why he made that mistake? Of course. But we also have to understand that he did make a mistake, and that's what led to the sequence of events that has occurred. Thank you for the comment. It's a really good comment. Really appreciate it. Good comments generally across the board, everybody. That's why I really appreciate all you guys for commenting and putting your questions and concerns. Don't have time to get to all of them today, just the way it is, but I'll do my best in the future, in tomorrow's videos and following videos, to talk to everybody's comments. A lot of interesting stuff happening, right? We'll continue to follow it, but until next time, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.